Okay. That's the AI doing that because it's now aware of what I'm going to share. So it attacks me to run interference, particularly against my eyes and my lungs, what I breathe. This is a weaponized phone, which means all the phones that are in all the markets. I would tell Batty Broussard this: you realize the entire communication system they set up is unlawful. It's against the law of one. I don't budge on that, Patty Broussard. Number two is the fact that one of the things that I do when you're learning at hyper speed, which means that's a gifted student because you're now gifting electrons at the highest rate of speed. That means you're an accelerator and you're accelerating the gifting of electrons at the highest rate of speed there is. That's the eternal engine. So I start with that at 4 years of age. Number two, one of the things that I do is try and reduce an entire library of everything that's running, that's being held in records, which is recordings, which is library, which are the memory banks. So you can think of memory banks as planetary, galactic, and universal memory banks, which is records. Then you have cosmic level records, right? Cosmina, crystalline records, okay? So what I do here is I try and make it very simple because I normally only work with children, because then what I have to do is clean your cache, which means to erase all your memory so you experience what love is. Eternal love, so you're not experiencing any resistance to experience what I am, which is eternal love. That's how it works. It's like starting all over, building another library. Because anything that is held in library that represents trauma or resistance to experience zero has to be healed in order to experience zero, which is eternity, which is the engine of creation. So now you're using an eternal engine to experience what you eternally create next. So your eternal engine means you're always experiencing eternity and you're never experiencing anything less than eternity. That means that you are the highest rate of accelerator in consciousness. So your oversoul is an accelerator of eternal electrons. It's like spitting bullets, right? That means those electrons are coming out of that sun at an eternal rate of speed. Couple that with the light engine, they become one. That's polarized consciousness. So you have pre-phase and then matter state. Now you're experiencing the matter at the speed at which you're experiencing it, which is called a torch speed, right? That means there's no delay. That's immediate. That's the flashlight sequences of going in and out, logging in, logging out, logging in, logging out. That's called a logos. Logos. Log into the operating system, the planetary software terrain, okay? So the reason that I thought this was important is because some of the stuff that's now being circulated through the library, okay, of, say, for example, YouTube. So this guy who's a bioneurologist was talking about the plasticity of the brain, or if you will, circuits that are firing, that represent the magnetic circuits that are opening and closing at the speed at which you're experiencing what you are, which you're learning. So when you're learning hyperspeed, you're learning hyperspeed learning. Now you're connected with other hyperspeed learners. You see how that works in a morphogenetic field structure? That's like opening everything up. That's the work we've been doing. So you experience so you don't lose the connection to the founders. The emerald. I'm emerald. And so that's an emerald guardian, okay? Go green, go green chlorophyll, right? That's why I power down spirulina every day. But you can understand it also from a Breatharian point of view, because I just came out from the outside, plugging my feet in, and then breathing with the sun. And then I began realizing, boy, my lens is going pink. And then it just goes across the whole sky, right? So the whole sky, I'm experiencing pink in the sky mirror, right? Pink roses, right? And I was really expanding the diaphragm, really, and breathing with the sun, where next thing I know is the whole sky across the Pacific Ocean, looking at the northern and sort of eastern side of this island. I was expanding it so much that I had loosened up some cartilage in my diaphragm, right? Because we know how to do this. That's Breatharian work, right? Breathing fire. And so what I thought was important, so I'm trying to keep this as a tight a focus as I can, is when I was listening to this neurobiologist talk about psilocybin, and we get into receptors, which is an antenna, neuroreceptors, right? And the benefit okay, of what psilocybin does. But understand there's a difference between the crystalline structure between something that is naturally produced and something that is unnaturally produced. So Batty Broussard talked about a perversion. You know what a perversion of nature is? That's called hijacking nature and trying to synthesize what's already been constructed or generated, which is real because it was an internal engine that was producing it. Because the crystalline structure of the way that light works to experience eternity, which means an eternal creation engine, was generating what it was experiencing in its mirror, the experience that we have through those codes, which represents the math, which is the function, and the form, which is the geometry. So you're experiencing the math and the geometry of the codes that represent what we experience through software, the impact or the effect of what we feel in a magnetic moment when we're experiencing, for example, psilocybin. Okay. Now, for me, because I've experienced a lot of it in my youth, it is one of my favorite psychedelics, because what is a psychedelic? Psyche, your state of consciousness. So your state of consciousness is running the codes that is represented by the mathematical form in which we're experiencing what we experience through our consciousness, the impact or the effect, because we're receiving the signals, which is signals intelligence, which is the math function, and the geometry of what we're experiencing in the color codes, what I call color codes. An artist, a healing artist. So the impact that it had on me when I experienced it is like another communication. Now I'm experiencing what it's communicating to me. Now I become aware of what I become aware of as a result of the impact of the math and the geometry of the consciousness that produced it, which is the programmer. Now I'm experiencing the program of psilocybin, right? Program apps. Now we're experiencing what that is. So there's a big difference between binary coded stuff and trinary coded stuff. Now we're back to 1 and 3, the original. The one is the eternity, right? So as I've covered this before about the relationship that numbers as math and fire letters have with what we experience to experience perfect balance between all the waves. So we're tuning into all the waves, which means our broadcast, our radio set, our TV station, right, is tuned in with all those waves, the plasma waves. Yeah, baby, yeah, we're tuned in, right? And so when you can directly experience what it is that you're doing by virtue of your oversoul's energy to maintain perfect balance, and you're running the frequencies that you are, the mirror in the sky is reflecting back to us what it is that we are by that level of communication, right? That's like tricamera, trivecta, right? The echo worlds, the ecosphere. That's why I'm listening to the air pressure right now. I can hear the inside, if you will, of the planet, the ecosphere, the biosphere, which is the bio operating system, the planetary operating system, the planetary consciousness field, because we're all plugged into a motherboard, God's motherboard, right? So one of the things I've tried to explain to keep this simple, particularly with children, is you're the co-creator of your own reality. What are you choosing to experience? So if you've healed and you're experiencing, for example, like I use Misha as a good example. I had a conversation with Mama last night because it was extremely challenging when you're trying to, if you will, bring somebody back to experience zero in their own software operating system by virtue of what's held in memory, which represents the miasma. It's like clearing the cache and clearing the memory banks of Misha's software by virtue of her being connected to the morphogenetic field structure, because we're all connected to the morphogenetic field structure. Now we're back to how much miasma needs to be cleared off, which means how much healing has to take place in order for every unit of consciousness within a universal, galactic, and a planetary template to experience zero. That's really what it is. So when you're experiencing eternity, you're not having to think about what it is that you're experiencing because it's already happening at a rate of speed where there's no delay. It's immediate. That's a speed function, which is a math function. Now you're experiencing the form and flow of the energy that you're experiencing. So that becomes the structure, the crystalline structure upon which the math and the form in which we experience it in form, shape, and color, right? So the energy is in motion. We're experiencing the spiritual motion that represents the math and the physics, or the math and the geometry that is coupled together, right? It just becomes one. Because the universe of one, or if you will, the single one, the ancient one, there's only one. That crystal spiral doesn't have to, if you will, stop and think about what I'm going to experience next. It's happening so fast that the math and the physics or the form naturally flows the way that creation energy flows in the natural way in which eternal energy is experiencing itself, experiencing what we're co-creating at the moment that we are, which means the speed at which we're experiencing we are. We're not losing any electrons, not one. We're not supposed to lose any electrons, which means no entropy, not a loss of one electron, because you're experiencing what you are, which is the highest accelerator of electrons. So you're using eternal electrons, which is the sound and light field, coupled with the light to become one. Now you're one with one. Now you're experiencing the energy that we are using as the eternal engine of creation to thus generate and manifest at a speed in which you don't have to stop. If I have to slow down to think about how this works, like the way that a teacher will put something up on the board to show you a map, or a way in which the math works, or the geometry works, or how to do art, or how to do music. If you're having to learn how that all works, it means that you don't already know how it works. It means that that information now has to be loaded into your RAM, and now you're going to run what is being put into RAM, which is what others are putting into your RAM. So when you realize that you are the eternal engine of creation yourself, you don't need to learn something that you've already learned how to do, because it's built in, which means the map, the codes, right? The template is built in. It's already been done. You see how that works? If the universal and galactic template, at the point at which it was arcing text, in other words, the creators that are working together that have created that template, it means that it's already been created. And it was created using eternal energy engine to generate it. So that means that the grid, which represents the Cathara grid, was created out of eternal energy. So when you're experiencing eternity, you're experiencing the eternals, the eternal engines of creation that created it and generated it using eternal energy in which it was created. And when you are experiencing eternity, which is the one, by lighting yourself on fire, which means you're not holding on to one electron, you are experiencing the original one, the first one. Since you're experiencing the one, it means that you can experience something next, that an eternal engine is thus manifesting into its environment what we see in our mirror by use of the energy that we're doing it with, which is what love is. That is called a beloved, which is the engine of creation, the first engine of creation. When you're experiencing the first engine of creation, you don't have to have somebody explain to you how it works. It already works naturally, and that's what it means when we get into the math and the form is the flow. So there is a natural flow that an eternal engine of creation is automatic, because it is the law of least effort to experience zero. So when you are experiencing the first crystal spiral, then you are experiencing the one. Then that means being with the one, you're always experiencing what love is as the engine that is generating your reality. That's a one. Okay? And so you can understand from a child's point of view, what it means is that you don't have to teach me something that I didn't already learn. Right? And that has a tendency, it's like when I had a conversation with Nathan the other day about what you know, what I know. See? And so when I would share things with him that I've experienced by virtue of the experience that was informing me of what I'm experiencing in energy, the experience that I'm having at the opening and closing of a magnetic circuit, running a software program, right? He would say, yeah, I know all that. I know all that. I know all that. Okay, well, then if you've already learned that, then let's change the conversation, right? Because otherwise in other words, you've learned it, I've learned it. Since we both learned it, we can move on to learn something else if there's something else to learn or experience, or we can go out to the beach and just have a new experience we've never had before and co-create it together, because you're experiencing the love that I am. I'm experiencing the love you're experiencing. Now you and I are in harmony and not doing any harm. Now you and I are actually generating higher waves because we're connected to the one. Now wherever we go, anything that's already there is going to experience what we are, which is what love is. That's a transmutation machine. So if there's any waves that are distorted or experiencing anything less than what love is at that location where we happen to be, now that we're there, whatever is there before we got there, and now that we're there, it's going to experience what we are, which is what love is. That means everywhere that you go, you're experiencing eternity, because that's the engine you're running, that you're experiencing being connected to the one. Which means the way that the math and the form works in the spiritual flow of energy is natural. It's like I used to use this word, it's like falling off a log, right? Which means I don't have to think about it. It's built in. It's already done. That's like saying the template's already in place. So what it means is, when it comes to crystalline records, is that that eternal engine, that means that you helped create it. You're the engine that is holding it in place by virtue of being able to go wherever you want to go within that template, because you have a map that is built in, because you are the flow and the energy that it was first created with. So that's like being one with one. It's like somebody creates a template, right? And then you jump into that template as a unit of consciousness, as an oversoul. And an oversoul polarity integrator is naturally experiencing what one is, what zero is, because it means that you're tuning out anything that isn't what eternity is, because if those waves are distorted, then you can't broadcast an equilibrium state in which all the waves that represent the plasma field generator that you are, because you're experiencing eternity, which is what love is, that goes on forever, gifting the highest rate of speed of electrons. And when that's coupled between, which means you are the electromagnetic radiation, waveform harmonics. So the waveform harmonics is the math and the form in which those waveform harmonics are being generated as an oversoul, which is polarity integration, which means I don't have to think about what polarity integration is. It means that you're automatically a transmutation machine, which means wherever you go, you are converting, torque converting, something that is not experiencing what zero is. Now whatever's there is experiencing zero. So what that means is you're healing whatever is there that needs to be healed wherever you go, plugged into a motherboard. So that's called transmutation of distorted waves, and I refer to them as DNA debris fields. Okay, the DNA debris fields, which are the fractures. So if you started out being whole, which means you're experiencing an eternal sun, right, that is gifting electromagnetic energy at the highest rate of speed as a co-creation generator, right, which means I'm not supposed to lose one fraction. So if you have a sphere, and then if you wanted to think of it as a clock face, and you realize how fast is that Merkaba spinning, you know, the actual rotation, is it in perfect balance? So if that ball that represents that sphere is accelerating so fast in perfect balance because it's an eternal sun, and you're experiencing the eternal sun, that's where they come up with the Son of God, okay? So when father and mother cancel out to become one, you are experiencing, when you use the terminology, a mother God. Okay? A father and mother joined as one. A mother and a father joined as one. They become one. That is an eternal blast furnace. Now you're the accelerator. Now you're with the accelerator. You're with the one. That's energetic synthesis. That means the math is perfect. That means that the spiritual form and flow of creation energy is perfect, because the fit is perfect. So now we're back to trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't fit, does it? Because the geometry doesn't work. Because the angles and the lines of communication doesn't fit. So if the math and the geometry fit perfectly, that's when we get into tolerances. That's when we get into the tolerances between the minus slash the plus. Remember how they do with mil-spec? For example, if you're going to drill a port, put a metal disc on a flat plate, just to simplify it, would be like a drill press, and you want to port something that's, say, 1/2 inch down, and you want to thread it, okay? If it's mil-spec, then the military is going to tell you what the specifications are to the tolerance, which means that port and that thread has to be within, say, 0.0013, whatever the designation is. So that means that the specification is the tolerance. That's what it is. It's a tolerance. It means that the fit, because otherwise the tolerance, say, of another thread, like you're going to have a steel pipe, like using Inconel or something like that, an exotic metal, and you're going to thread it, then it has to be threaded to a very specific thread specification. This is the thread specification that they want. So that means that you have the same way that tap and die work, right? So now you want a port, right, which is the same thing as a socket and a plug with electromagnetic energy, right? The girl and the boy and the girl are one. So you have the plug, right? That's the seed, right? Plugged into the socket, which is the receiver. Now they're one. Now they're together. So the electrified sound and the light become one. Now they're joined as one. Now you're experiencing an eternal creation engine. Now that you're an eternal creation energy, you're experiencing eternal spheres wherever you go, right? So you are a generator of energy spheres, eternal energy spheres, right? So that's what you become. You become one. You become one with one. Now you're co-creator with the grand creator. Now you're experiencing being one with all creation. And that means you're whole, which means you're not experiencing one loss, not one fractal. Because if you're losing any voltage, if you're losing one electron, you can detect it. And that's hypersensitivity, which is a hyperspeed magnet. That's a monopole. That's the rod. That's the vertical rod. So in the vertical rod of a cross, and then you have the horizontal line between 1 and 2D, then imagine you're experiencing eternal light in the vertical and the horizontal. That's the first engine. That's eternal sun, the first atom cell, first spiral. When you are experiencing what that is, you're with the one, now you're one. That's a beloved. That means you're experiencing zero wherever you go. You're experiencing zero wherever you go. You're experiencing zero wherever you go. That's called zero resistance, which means there's no errors. Which means you canceled out the X and the Y, which means you canceled out the ladders, which means you've canceled out the DNA, because you're not experiencing the DNA. Now you're experiencing the DNA. Now you're experiencing the software. Now you're experiencing the software. So the oversoul is using a certain amount of energy that we choose to use in order to run the software. So imagine that you're an eternal engine and you know that you're everywhere, which means your energy is in everything because you can't escape it. Remember? Now we're back to want to be a tree for the day, right? That's just like with little boo-boo. There's a black cat. I love this cat. Whenever I go out, it's just like, Kunjo, I love you for what you do with the cats. You can see their eyes just glowing. So you know that there's God and Goddess energy that is running those cats. In other words, you want to be a cat for a day. The energy of what love is, an eternal engine, which means that little cat is experiencing eternity. Because the engine that is represented by the consciousness, which is eternity, is the energy that the cat is running on. Whoa, an eternal cat. The cat is experiencing eternal energy. That means that cat is experiencing being eternally loved. So there must be something that represents an eternal engine of consciousness that is experiencing itself being a cat. That's what I am. Okay? That means you can run any vehicle because the energy that vehicle is presenting itself as a cat, is experiencing what eternal love is. Right? So that's why once you've let yourself on fire, you realize your energy is in everything. You can't escape God. You can't escape the first one. That's knowing one from the other. So you realize how that works the way I've described it, that I am what you are, that I'm giving love to. So if you're not experiencing that, that means you're experiencing the resistance to experience that. Now, when you scale out across a morphogenetic field structure of entire universal and galactic template, and on an individual basis, as an individual soul that's running the software, you can sort of see how that works when you're measuring the difference between the torque speed difference between one and the other. Right? In order to do what? Maintain balance. That's the law. That means as a polarity integrator, oversoul, it means that you're bringing in the law wherever you go. So that means you're a transmutation machine. That means you're restoring everything back to zero, which means you're restoring everything back to the law. That's called a full reset. That's as if time doesn't exist anymore. It's like starting over, right? Starting over in the universe, right? Hey, now we're experiencing time wave zero. Yeah, the time wave zero spiral. Adam's time wave zero, the first atom cell, the first living cell, the first living cell, like mononuclear, the first living cell, right? And then you have multicellular, right? Multispheres, right? So now you get into 12 spheres, right? So you start with a single sphere, and then you go to multicellular spheres. Now you're into multidimensional spheres. Now you're into multidimensional and multidensity, right? So that's why when I was a child growing up, it's like I'm not supposed to experience any loss of any electrons. So therefore, I'm the accelerator of the universe. The creation engine of the universe is what love is. It's on fire to give this energy away. That means you're learning at the highest rate of speed because you're learning through the one. So the one is always with you. So when the one is always with you, the one is informing you of what's happening because you're always with the one. That means you are with the highest creative intelligence in the entire cosmos because you're experiencing eternity communicating with you. Okay. And that is, if you will, an oxymoron, right? And why it was so difficult when I was a little kid to have the one insulted, which means how do I respond to that when you realize you're being insulted? And the one that's being insulted is the one, because you cannot fool the one, because the one is eternal light, which is eternal unconditional love that's on fire to love you. So when you're experiencing being loved eternally and you sign your letters, I love you forever and always, that's an extension. That's a communication that's coming from the one as a message. So you become a messenger, a neuron messenger, right? N equals 0, right? Nah. A is 1. That's why what is it? A1 sauce? A1 sauce. What do they put in that, right? So that's how you can tell whether it's a 1 or not, right? The 1, the 0, eternity, right? And so how this works with binary coded zeros and ones and the torque speed differential between something that's a digital virtual world simulation and experiencing something that isn't a simulation, because you're the one that's generating the eternal spheres. That means you are living in a world and you're experiencing what you are, which is eternal love. That means that reality and everything in that reality of all those spheres that are being generated, which is a template. You're experiencing eternal love wherever you go through those spheres. And that means that you're experiencing the law wherever you're going. So you're bringing the law in wherever you're going. So when you translate that through being a mother and father joined as one, and there isn't any separation between one and the other to experience being one with the all creation that you're gifting electrons to, and you're not experiencing one loss of one electron, then you know that you're with the highest accelerator there is. That's the first engine. And so that is an eternal blessing. And so that's what I share with others. But when it came to the neuroplasticity and the bio stuff, an operating system, this guy was talking about neuron, generating a gazillion neurons. It's like, I don't have to have somebody else tell me what it is that I'm already doing by virtue of what I learned how to become. Right? So then there's what you experience of what you're held captive to in your library because of something that they're experiencing that isn't what love is. That's why the transmutation machine of being a polarity integrator is going to collapse the wave of anything that is less than what? The one spiral. Which means you're returning to the one every time we take a breath. That's breathing eternal fire. That's what we breathe, is eternal fire. The eternal spirit of fire. Right? And learning how to light yourself on fire because you have, it's sort of the way that absence of fear works, you know. Love is the absence of fear. Okay? Absolute love means that we're not holding on to one electron. We're experiencing the eternal generator. The eternal generator of electromagnetic energy, waveform harmonics. And that harmony is what we call it. It's called harmony. We are in harmony with the one. We are experiencing being with the one that is in love with our universe. When we are in love with our universe, uni as in one, it began with the one. When we are experiencing the first crystal spiral, the first atom seed, we are experiencing being loved forever and always from that single point inside of an eternal sphere that is spinning, right? Spitting fire, breathing fire. So that means that the inside of that sphere is experiencing being whole, the whole creation. Thank you for your energy. 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 That's eternally grateful, which is an eternal blessing. And so when it comes to the math and the physics and the codes and the programming, it may seem simple to me, but I try and break it down in the most simplest way that I know how to describe it. But even like when I use Nathan as an example, okay, what I'm actually measuring is the resistance and how much damage has been done to his circuits in order to be able to experience what we experience. And if he's able to experience what I'm experiencing, which is from a polarity integrator's point of view, it means is he able to experience zero by canceling out, okay, that which we're held captive to, so that we're experiencing what love is, an eternal love vibration, right? That's why the example that I use when I was in the presence of Misha one day, she was bawling like a little baby. And that means she was experiencing the love that I have in my heart, which is eternal. She was experiencing because we were close together. Her heart and my heart probably wasn't more than 2 feet together. I was looking directly into her eyes. And she wanted to let it go. You know what it means to let it go? That's the leash. In other words, our minds are being held captive by putting a leash on something else because we need that energy. You know, it's just like Oceana Neon described it, right? A Shark Tank. You know, when you're chasing electrons, that's an inverter. You're not experiencing being the highest accelerator of electrons. So you realize that her energy, her soul matrix, is held captive to something that is feeding on her energy. And as a result of that, she's chasing electrons to keep replenishing herself of what her own mind knows that she keeps losing. And because as a shape shifter, because of the RH factor that she's running, she's struggling to maintain her balance. She's fighting a tug of war between spirals. Right? And so she's wanting to experience the love that she's experiencing in my heart, but she's wanting to clear all of that goo, all those distortions that represent her entire record, right? That is holding her captive to not be able to clear all those distortions that are in the planetary memory banks. And obviously, what is connected through the DNA, which is the language of the DNA that she's running, which is the template that she's running, that is preventing her from experiencing zero, which is an eternal love vibration. But she realized by the amount of energy that she is releasing, that she was being held captive by in her library, which is the RAM, she's bawling. So you see her bawling and bawling and bawling and bawling. She's releasing it. She's releasing it. She's releasing it. She's releasing it. She's letting it go. She's letting it go. She's letting it go. She's letting it go. You're seeing somebody heal right before your very eyes. And that's what a soul can do. That's what an oversoul polarity integrator is able to do, is transmute all that energy that is holding her mind's energy captive to experience the imbalance and the distortions of what she's held captive to, of running that in an APIN grid. So when she is in the presence of zero, because I'm experiencing the eternal love in my heart that is transmuting all of that, being with her, is when I said to her, unload all of it. Unload every bit of it. Which means do not experience fear, but I'm not telling her do not. what I would share with her is, it's okay to let it go, Misha. You can let it go. You can let it go. You can let it go, which means you can transfer all that energy, which is to transfer all those codes. You can transfer it right into my oversoul matrix, and I will transmute all of it because I'm experiencing eternity. The one is with me. I am with the one. Eternal energy can transmute everything that you've been held captive to, that is this other spiral. Letting go of that spiral. That's the shape-shifting part. That's the tug-of-war between one and the other. Dead light, but she's experiencing eternal light through my heart, and she's bawling. She was wanting to let it go. She was wanting to let it go. She kept crying, and she kept crying, and she kept crying. And I could feel in her own soul matrix, she was within a split of a nanosecond of releasing all of it, upon which I experience what she releases as that energy transfer, okay, which represents those goo codes, to transmute it, which means the firewall will burn it up. That eternal sun will burn it up, right? Now she experiences the vision that I had of her standing outside with both her arms up, experiencing the state of love and joy, the songs of Lyra. Right? Now you're experiencing her spirit has been restored, because that means that her template has been reset. She's experiencing a reset within her because she's now experiencing an eternal love vibration, which means what I'm experiencing in her is what I'm experiencing in my heart and soul. She's now experiencing in her. That means she let go of all of it. So you can see how that works when you get into the PTSD stuff, right? When you've been traumatized. And that memory, particularly what happened to her as a little girl. I mean, we're talking, as I remember it, 3 and 4 years of age, being sodomized by a relative. And the amount of spiritual torture and physical and emotional and sexual abuse that this girl experienced, okay, that I was able to determine she was running 3 different personalities, okay, 3 different Mishas, okay. So in other words, you want to bring her back into the one to experience eternal love through my heart she's experiencing in hers. And when you're experiencing a girl that wants that desperately, and I mean desperately, that I experienced one time when she came up, I hadn't seen her for a few weeks, and she jumps over when she sees me, and she comes running out there to get on her knees, and then and put her arms around your legs like she's worshiping the energy. What she's saying is that I want that energy. I remember that energy. I want to be with that energy really bad. Okay? That's why it's hurt so much. Because she's still having problems. Because I gave her my word I would restore her, because she wanted to be restored to experience zero. That's called desperately seeking Susan. She wants to experience Mama. Okay? Because that's what I experienced through my heart and soul. That's why we're here. Okay? That's why I will always love that girl with my heart and soul forever, and she knows that. She's an O negative. Just like Nathan is. Right? And this is how this is sort of how the binary stuff gets kicked back in your face, right? When they try and say that I'm what you are, I'm not what that is, which means they're lying to themselves when they know that they are. Okay. Imagine that somebody's telling you, yeah, I'm O negative, right? And then after the information that they learned through me, for me to know the difference because I can read their template, okay, which means the codes that they're firing, the fire letters that are firing, and know that he's running a reversal current, and he's held captive by that because His energy, as Aaron and I would talk about last night, his energy is, it's not as bad as Misha. Okay. Misha's energy is on a level of, to use terms that are used in psychology to describe this, it's like, you know what a manic is, right? It's a manic is like, whoa, it's all over the place. So you realize from a mental health care professional, which is, if you think of all my training, everything I've been through, well, I work with children, right? Which means you want to work with mentally ill adults, or would you rather work with children that haven't become that? Now you get into the energy harvesting system and going from one generation to the next, from one generation to the next, siphoning off energies off of souls, right? And so the point in all this is that she had the blessing. You know, the blessings that I receive, I share with others. And so that's the whole purpose of it all. And what I mentioned to Nathan the other day, you will have, no matter what happens, whatever you experience in the future, you will at least have the opportunity to experience what I experience in my heart, being with the one that you've had the opportunity and blessing to experience through me. So I am simply a conductor, a superconductor, a hyperspeed conductor of the energy that I experience in me, which is gifting electrons, gifting love forever and always. You have had an experience to be with somebody that experiences the one. And that's an eternal blessing because it's an eternal gift. That's what a gifted student is. You're gifting electrons at the highest rate of speed. That's a hyper rate of speed, right? He will have had the opportunity to experience somebody who is running at a hyper learning speed. So I'm sharing information that a hyperspeed learning is sharing with him, and he can process that. And he's been processing that. He's made remarkable recovery, even though a Kanaka Maholi, Lemurian, felt that he was a non-repairable. So you know how a one is going to feel about that, right? By how hypersensitive what we feel, because we feel everything. Wherever we go, that's hypersensitivity, right? On the electromagnetic spectrum, right? Of experiencing perfect balance within a planetary Merkaba system. That's really what it is. And then you can scale that up to a galaxy, scale it up to a universe, scale it up to the cosmic level. That's a cosmic level receiver. Okay, that's a Nova Soul Polarity Integrator. So it means wherever we are, doesn't matter wherever we go in the entire cosmos. If I ever experience anything less than what love is, which is eternal love, we will detect it. That's a sensor. That's the highest level of sensitivity. That's why I cry so much. And so what Nathan would do, for example, is when I had a discussion with him yesterday, he now told me he was O positive. I didn't say anything to him about that, right? Why? Because I'm not going to get into a binary ping pong game about what's true and not true, and then get into an argument. So you understand what arguments are when it comes to biocomputers communicating with each other, frequencies and codes. Remember, we're back to the math function and the geometry. He's not able to process that. So when he was telling me that he's O positive, you can see how that works with the internet. Okay, you can see how the AI will use, okay, it's actually a rearrangement of the fire letters that are based on the reversal current of an inverted state of consciousness that uses what it becomes aware of that we communicate logged into this system. And then what it will do through one of its bots or one of those that's held captive to that spiral, it'll kick back that information through a speakerphone saying, I'm O positive. And it's like, no, you told me that you're O negative. And you were sticking with that for a while, even though I can read the map, which is the DNA, and to know that. And so it's like, you don't need to expose it because you're working with Nathan, okay? And so maintain your peace, maintain your balance, maintain your harmony, maintain your rhythm, right? And so it reaches a point where we're not going to play. Remember, we do not play war games. And that's what the AI binary is. It's competing against each other over what we know and what we don't know based on our experiences by virtue of what we've learned. And now we're back to learning speed, and gifted learners and gifted and those that are running the highest accelerator of gifting electrons. Now you're with the one, the only one. And there's only one. And when you're experiencing being the one, you're gifting electrons to the all creation, because you're equal unto all, in which we're distributing those electrified sound bullets, right? The acoustics, which simply means is that everyone is experiencing what we are, which is what love is, wherever we go. And that's what the law is, because that's the law of least effort in which to do that. That means that the math, the function of math, and the function of form, which is the geometry, works perfectly, which means there are no mistakes and there is no error. That's the highest level of creative intelligence. And don't let anybody fool you, because I know better. So I knew better when I came out of the gate and came in through my mother's biological womb. Running this, I was standing my ground with that rod, right? That vertical rod known as God's staff, right? And the horizontal line that's full of light. Running light throughout the entire thing, that which means eternal light is running vertical and eternal light is running horizontal. And it's also running in the entire sphere, which means that entire sphere of consciousness experiencing eternity. Whoa, a cosmic level sun. Yeah, an eternal sun, the first eternal sun, the eternal sun of the one that experiences being joined, being one with all creation, that is gifting love to, that goes on forever. And so I wanted to share that this morning for the reasons that I do, because I push it into the system. And you'd be surprised how it comes back to you later through other speaker phones that you find on the internet or on a YouTube, or you can experience it. It's like working with Kunjoy. I can experience things like I'm doing right now, and then all of a sudden, without having a conversation with her, all of a sudden something will pop up in my window that's related to something I put up on here. And that's the beauty and the genius of how the morphogenetic field structure works, which is the language of DNA that's being communicated between software templates, and being able to clear the miasma by virtue of the work that's being done, right? In order for us to be able to experience a greater expansion and capacity to experience more living light, which is real light, which is what love is, right? To maintain the balance of the pole, because everybody in the entire cosmos has an inherent right to experience what love is, to be healed from whence it all began. So that's always going to be my perspective as a guardian perspective, because that is an individual or a unit of consciousness, a soul, if you will, that is experiencing eternal love. So when we experience eternal love through our heart, it means we're able to detect something that isn't. And if it isn't, then I know that it needs to be healed. So we bring that energy in order for them to experience the higher vibration of eternity, which that means they know they're in the presence of something that loves them, a soul that loves them, because they're experiencing the vibration of the highest frequency. So that unit of consciousness now experiencing what we are. So they can translate that frequency and vibration, right? They're going to heal because that vibrational energy is in their presence, right? And so that's the work that we're doing. And these are, these are the challenges. It's really, I try and keep it really simple, which is what I call the healing art of communication, which is the communication of light, which means we communicate because we're so sensitive. I am so sensitive that I don't ever want to say anything to anybody, no matter who you are, that ends up triggering anything held in memory that represents any trauma, which means any resistance is still being experienced on a motherboard. Right? So, and the curse in that, if you want to call it a curse, is because you may not